Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. Thanks Codementor and Codementor team for hosting the event. Yeah, we see from the quiz that the biggest majority of people here are working with JavaScript and TypeScript, and the talk is focused mostly around the JavaScript TypeScript ecosystem. Then again, the principles that I will be discussing are relevant across the board, and I will even mention the biggest framework for using outside of the JavaScript ecosystem. So let me share back the screen and let us start. Monorepos in the JS world, I actually think that it's not describing the talk as I wanted, so I renamed it just before the launch to Monorepos for JS developers. Yes, a bit about me. So I've been working for quite a few years, several years, on different products with different startups, and recently I've changed my focus. A few years back, I've changed my focus to be working as a consultant with many companies, helping them build and grow their teams effectively and with a reduced risk. So another couple of words about Codementor, because for me, it really, like the platform really helped save a lot of time. I am an expert in what I do, and I'm an expert in JavaScript and in the JavaScript ecosystem. Then again, in let's say AWS, I know almost nothing. There was a few times where I needed some help in AWS, and when I need help in AWS, it means that I'm about to spend a week of work, I don't know, maybe a few days of work, learning some specific feature of the platform, of networking. So yeah, I just went to Codementor, and in a few hours, everything will resolve. So thanks for the platform, and thanks for this event and the stage. So what will we cover today? Section 1, basic concepts, then like basic concept about Monorepo and how to discuss it. What are the basic terminology that is related to managing a Monorepo? JavaScript Monorepo ecosystem, which is I assume, JavaScript Monorepo ecosystem, which will be the second section. And the third section is a deep dive into NX and how NX manages deep relationship inside our projects. So basic concepts, here it is. We have a few words that we should be familiar with in order to have this conversation about how to manage what is a monorepo, how to manage it effectively. And the terms are project or package, repository, monolith, polyrepo, and monorepo. So we discovered the project package. A repository is just a Git repository. A monolith is a server usually, or a UI, but usually a server that has a huge code base. It has a few advantages. That is, it is very easy to set up, and it is a very natural workflow to grow the project into being a monolith. So we don't need too much expertise or anything like it. It is very easy to debug. Since it's a single code base, we can place the debugger on the top of the first line of the entry file, and we can just step our way through the entire application. So we're actually, as a development worldwide community, we're working about how to create a similar experience for microservices. Maybe there are some services you guys know, so you can write something about it in the chat if you know a service that helps debugging microservices effectively. And another advantage of a monolith is that it is great for small applications. Then again, it is not exactly a monolith, but let's say if you have some small internal tool and you're using Next for it, Next.js, it's great, right? You don't need to run many different stuff. You don't need to configure anything. You don't need to know anything. You install it, run it. So yeah, this is it. Now the monolith disadvantages is, since it's huge, we're going to be building and testing this entire code base every time every single time something tiny changes. So even if I change, I don't know, some basic UI feature, some small UI feature in the super admin screen that does not affect no one, I will still rebuild the entire code base. It will also be harder for me to test specific features. It will be possible, but harder. And I will deploy the entire code base and run the entire code base as it is. So, the disadvantages with running the entire code base is that when we're scaling, when we have many instances of a single huge code base, and for some reason it spins up many additional instances because of some additional load, it will be hard to profile and know exactly where the bottleneck is. Where if we're having microservices and we see that a single small service suddenly spins up many instances, it will be much easier to identify. So these are the disadvantages, advantages of a monolith, and basically its comparison to microservices in a very shallow way. Obviously, it's a huge topic. There's a lot of content out there about the two, but yeah, this is not the topic of the conversation. A polyrepo means that we had a monolith, we wanted to split it to different projects, and the most intuitive way to do it is to have a polyrepo. At least it was the most intuitive way, I assume. So polyrepo essentially means that we manage a Git repo for each project. So polyrepos also have a few advantages. So it's a very intuitive approach, right? We have a project, a repository, right? Single one-to-one relationship. And there is no tooling or expertise needed to set it up. And each repository has its own CI CD that, again, it has a lot of advantages with comparison to a monolith, because we can test and build and deploy things independently. And it has some disadvantages. So it's very hard to maintain. If you have many repositories that you run, you usually also have many IDEs that you run, that as a developer you open simultaneously, and you somehow, jungle them all together. And yeah, you will have a slower onboarding. Yeah, it has quite a few dependencies. So as you scale, it will be harder to manage. As the more Git repositories you have, the harder it will be to manage. And so the answer is the Monorepo. And the Monorepo is basically just a repository that has many projects and packages. So these are the basic concepts. And yeah, let's go to the next section, which is JS Monorepo, the JS Monorepo ecosystem. And in order to understand the ecosystem, we need to understand the story behind the ecosystem. How do we develop? So I basically outlined the technologies, but let's look at it in the way that the project or the ecosystem evolves with time. So first we have a monolith. We somehow split it to many different. We have a monolith. We understood that for some reason, we don't have a monolith, but we understood that for some reason, having many services is good for our case, and obviously they're interdependent. So in some cases, it's very easy. We just run different services in our application, and these services just has different ports, and they make HTTP requests to one another. But on other cases, they will be dependent. So we will have one project that is a dependency, an NPM dependency of another project. In this case, we will link the repositories together with NPM link. The next stage, after we have many repositories, we'll discuss it in detail, is to be shallowly managing with Lerna. And the third one will have its own section. So yeah, let's dive into it. Linking packages, so using NPM link and yarn link, is just symlinking that is managed, symlinks that are managed by NPM or yarn. It's nothing too special, but it's very useful. It's very useful, especially when you develop an external library locally. So let's say you want to start playing with React, and you want to try develop the React library, right? Not using it, but developing it. So what you will do is you will git clone the React repository and you will build it, and you will make an npm link or a yarn link between your package, between the React that you just cloned and your project where you're using React. So it is a very cool feature for stuff like this. If you have a small Polyrepo, like 2 to 3 Polyrepo repositories that are interrelated and they need to be linked, it will be very easy to set up and use. But the more projects, the more repositories you have, it just doesn't scale. It will be very hard to maintain. You will have many versioning issues, many build issues that will need to manage. And this is where many teams start using Lerna. So an interesting thing about Lerna is that it's not actively maintained. Guys, one thing I would like to ask is that all questions, please type in the Q&A section so that we will review them in the end of the talk and they won't be lost in the chat. So an interesting thing about Lerna is that even though it's widely used, it has over 1 million downloads per week. It's not maintained. So yeah, that's the state of Lerna. It's widely used and it's not maintained. Just a disclaimer. And we were at the stage where we have several repositories and it's daunting to manage them. What we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a Lerna project, and we will use Lerna import to all of the external projects into our new Monorepo. So we will basically use the Lerna import command in order to convert the Polyrepo to a Monorepo. And Lerna, the way to think about and the way to look at Lerna is like this. So you can see my GitHub screen. You can see my browser. Can you type it in the chat if you can see my browser, just so I won't lose you guys again? Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks. Okay, so we have the Create React App open here, just the GitHub repo under Facebook Create React App, and this is a Lerna managed project. Lerna, as a convention, has a packages folder, and it just manages all of the packages inside the packages folder. What do I mean by manage? I mean that you can run a Lerna command, let's say Lerna run start, and it will run start for all of the projects. If we want to install all of the dependencies for all of the projects, we can run Lerna Bootstrap. Lerna Bootstrap will also interlink them. Yeah, so let's look at React scripts, and let's say that React scripts has many dependencies, and one of its dependencies is the bubble plugin named asset import. So Lerna Bootstrap will install all of React script dependencies with the exclusion of bubble plugin named asset import. And for this one, it will just make a symlink using the linking technique that we talked about before, the npm link. It will just link it. So Lerna Bootstrap is a very powerful command, and generally, Lerna is a very powerful tool that has a lot of different utilities to manage many packages effectively. So yeah, that's Lerna packages. And the way to really think about Lerna, I think that they have this amusing logo that is really describing what Lerna is. A single entity that has many heads, and each head does its own thing, and they're all controlled from a central place. So yeah, so after we manage projects with Lerna, usually we also reach to a certain bottleneck with managing the project, and that's where NX comes to the picture. So the last part, the NX part, receives its own section. So we've discussed the Monorepo journey, and now we will discuss NX, deepening the projects and lips with NX. So in order to better understand what is Lerna and what is NX, I've drawn this small graph for illustration. So Lerna is a single head, right? And it manages many packages. On the other hand, NX has a graph that is representing all of the different applications and libs. So in Lerna, the parallel to what we see here in Lerna will be package. But with NX, we have the relationship of each package in a very deep and nested way. So it won't only symlink, it will make many smart choices and actions with regards to this dependency, right? So I haven't invented the graph. Actually, NX has its own graph, and we will soon look at this is a graph that NX generates, and we will soon look at it in more detail with a small demo. So briefly speaking about NX, it builds and tests projects only based on what we've changed. Lerna also does it in a way, but they have some differences that we will soon discuss. When changing a library, this is one of the biggest library. When changing a library, it will also build all of the dependents of this library. So if I have a UI app that is that has a UI lib in its dependencies, and we update the UI lib, we will have to rebuild the UI app. So this type of workflows NX does out of the box, and it manages it for us. And the last and very interesting thing that NX does is that it caches the build results. So if I've built the UI lib and I'm now working on the UI app, I won't have to rebuild the UI lib since it was already built. I will use the cache. Okay, so let's look at a small demo. This is a terminal session that I've recorded for this talk. So yeah, basically here we're just creating an NX project with create NX workspace, similar to create React app but with NX. So after running the command, we have a few choices to select from. We can either create an empty workspace that has some pre-configured setups for different type of workflows. We can create a single application, and we also can create a full stack application like, let's say, React Express. This is just the boilerplate, and it's very nice, but actually NX has a CLI for generating all types of libraries and applications. So even if we choose an empty template, we will be able to easily fit it up with some boilerplate. But for this case, I've used the React Express just so we will have something to look at it and play around with. So this demo is not real time. I've reduced the installation time so we will be able to skip the boring stuff. And yeah, basically after we make our choices, it's installed, and let's go to the code. So after we created it, yeah, let me just go back to the slide so I won't miss anything. Yes, after we went back to the after we installed NX, we can type NX graph, and it will show us our dependency graph. So it says here that we need to select something from the sidebar in order to see what's going on. So I'm just going to click show all projects, and here we see all the projects that NX has created with the Create NX app. And if we will look at the folders, we see that we have an apps folder and a libs folder. And this is a big part of NX's philosophy or principles, or I think they call it a mental model. And yeah, so here we see what depends on what. And the arrow points, like each project points to its dependencies. So the monomi E2E dependency is monomi, and the monomi dependency, the single dependency, is API interfaces. Theoretically speaking, if we will add additional interfaces, libraries, utilities, and monomi will be dependent on them, so it will have many errors coming out of it. But since it's just the boilerplate project, it's a very simple graph. So as you grow, the graph will grow more and more complex. So let's discuss how things will be built differently here with different use cases. let's say I'm updating the interface. Let's say I'm updating the API interfaces. NX will then see who is dependent on API interfaces. It sees that both the API and Monomi is dependent on them, so it will build the API and the Monomi, and then it will check who is dependent on each and every one of them. So it will say that API has no dependencies. It will finish its work then, and it will rebuild the E2E recursively. If, on the other hand, I have not changed the interfaces for a while, and I only changed the Monomi, it will then only rebuild the Monomi and the Monomi into E. And if I will only change the Monomi, it will only change the Monomi. So again, this is a very small project, but imagine having, I don't know, 45 applications, which is, I think, a reasonable amount for even a small company, and having, I don't know, tens of libraries. It can reduce quite a lot of build time. So it is a very, very powerful tool. And the next thing I'd like to show is the NX caching mechanism. So NX has a build cache. Build cache basically says that once I'm running something, once I'm building something, it caches it. So let's see how it works. This session is shown in real time. So we'll be pausing it, but the build time is real. NX build Monomi, it will see that it has no cache, so it will generate the entire process. I'm going to pause it for a minute, and we can see that it was built for it took 7 seconds to build. Also, NX has a dashboard where I can see some additional details about my build, and I can share it with my friends, teammates, in case I need it. So yeah, that's just the output I had. I can see it also here. That's just the output that I had when I ran it. I can see that it had no cache, right? It has a cache miss, and I can see that it took 6 seconds. Funny, here it says 7. So yeah, I will now run NX build Monomi again. Let's see what happens. This time it took 64 milliseconds. It's hard to notice how fast it was because the second I typed it, it recreated it. So here we see that the build hit the local cache. We will see the same output as before, but we see that the build has hit a local cache. I will run it again without doing anything special. It will again hit the local cache, so nothing interesting. But this time, I will run it again, but before running it again, I will remove the NX cache folder. So NX stores the cache locally inside the node modules.cache folder. When I remove it, we will have no local cache to use from. So let's see how long it takes, and let's discuss what happens. And there we go. Again, not 7 seconds, but not 64 milliseconds, right? This time it took 2 seconds. And let's see inside the dashboard what was going on. So this time we have a cache hit from the cloud. So let's review again the different symbols that it had, just so yeah. So we can have either cache miss, can have a local cache, or a cloud cache, and yeah. So and this is why it will take 2 seconds, which is not 64 milliseconds, but it is not 7 seconds, and it scaled. So if your build takes 10 minutes and you have a cloud cache, it will still take 2 seconds. You know, maybe a bit more because you have more assets to download, but it will still take several seconds just to download the assets, and you're ready. After I ran it one time and it downloaded it from the cloud, it will again take only 66 milliseconds since it stored it locally again. Now, another great thing about the cloud cache is that after I ran the build script locally and it cached to the cloud, NX takes my package.json, it takes the entire file system that I have, it takes the node version and a few other parameters, and it hashes them to a single SHA. And every time that another developer in another machine runs build with the same exact settings, it will download it and it will use it. So accumulatively, we're speaking about a lot of time and resources saved. So this is a very cool and useful feature, especially again for large projects. And let's move on. NX has a few other features. So we only touched on its dashboard. It has a few other cool features inside of it. It has distributed workers. So we have this complex tree we're building. This depends on this, depends on that. And if we run everything sequentially, it will take so long. Let's say it will take a lot of time. If we parallelize it on a single machine, we will be limited by this machine's resources. So NX allows us to spin up many machines and distribute the work between them. So if we have a build that's, let's say the entire build takes 10 to 20 minutes, like let's say 20 minutes, spinning up a few workers can reduce the time probably by half, probably even more, depending on the dependency graph you have and on your project settings. So yeah, distributed workers is again a huge resource saver. NX has standard scripts for generating applications and libraries, and for serving and building these applications and libraries. So it's very useful once you start using it inside your organization or even internally. Like even for projects that I use on my own, I find it very useful that you have very similar scripts to run the same things. And yeah, if anyone here has worked with Angular or with another platform that has generators, it's awesome. It's really awesome. So having generators is a big thumbs up for me. So yeah, this is the outline. This is basically the topic, and we're entering the Q&A in a few minutes. If anyone has questions that you haven't typed yet, feel free to do so. So what we've discussed so far is the life cycle of a project and the life cycle of the JavaScript ecosystem evolving around complex projects. And we also discussed how NX helps and in which stage it helps during our journey. Also discussed what exactly NX does in order to help us and what features it brings to the workflow. If you'd like some additional resources or reading, the sessions I've recorded for the bash sessions are at AskKinema. I think that's the way to pronounce it. Tilda and Jen. The NX website is the NX Dev. And actually a bit of history about NX. And yeah, we will run out of time just after this. So NX was built by a couple of developers that were working on Google. And in Google, they saw the concept of Bazel. I think inside Google, it's called Blaze, which is basically the mental model under which NX was built. But with while NX is a project that's aimed for JavaScript, Bazel is a project that's aimed for many lower level languages. So Go, C#, Java, Rust users will probably want to use Bazel. And just another word about Bazel. So Google has a huge monorepo. Yes, Google is the mother of all monorepos. They have like 80 something terabyte, maybe 90 by now terabytes of code inside the code base. So you can imagine how complex it is when some change happens in one place to realize what needs to be built as a chain reaction. So Bazel manages it for other frameworks and languages. Q&A. So Ahmed El Marci asked, if we use the npm link, this will not add the package to package.json. How to deal with it on production deploy? Yes, so if we're using npm link, it's a correct answer, because if we're using npm link, all npm does is that it takes one package and creates a symlink to another package. And there are a few different things that we need to discuss in order to answer this. First of all, is the linked package only local, or does it live inside npm? So if it lives on npm, we will store the, let's say if we're using React, which is a simpler example. Let's say I'm developing my own app that uses React, but I'm also developing React as a side project. So I will have React inside my node modules on the application I'm developing, and yeah, I have my inside the package JSON of the application I'm working on, React as a dependency with its version and everything. And when I'm linking it to a local thing. So when I'm deploying it inside the CI script or whatever, I would rather install it, right? So that's one use case. If the application is actually live somewhere inside npm. On another use case, I will have one project. On another use case, I will have one project that is using another project of mine that is not published to npm. This is a bit more tricky, and there are a few ways to work around it, but really NX solves it in a very nice and elegant way. So that's one approach. If we'd like to use to not use neither Lerna or npm, we can bundle it using Webpack or something like this. We can we can do quite a few other things. Let me know if you'd like me to discuss the other options here, since it's a very broad topic and we can dive into many different branches. So Kirill asked, how does it manage versioning? How does it meaning NX, or it meaning, yeah. So NX has a single state of, got it. So NX has a single state of, and NX has a single state of the entire monorepo at a single time. So as opposed to having the previous example where we have, let's say, Lerna, also Lerna, by the way, one monorepos, let's say, has a single state for the entire app, desirably. And so when let's start from the Polyrepo. I'm having my own project, my own application, and I have React. So every time React will be upgraded, I will upgrade React manually, right? So this is the painful thing. If I have many dependencies, it will be a nightmare. So the way Lerna will do it is I think it has a bump script. I'm not sure. I think that it has a bump script. When I upgrade one version of a package, it will update all of its dependencies. I'm not sure. NX does it in a completely different way. NX manages the dependencies without regards to npm. So it's not aimed to publish things to npm. It's aimed to manage things entirely from the code base and build things from the code base. I think that you pretty much do not need to think about versions unless you publish public packages. Pretty much do not need to think about versions when working with NX. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. So what about Turborepo? Any thought on that? I actually haven't played with Turborepo, though I heard that it has some advantages, like it uses Go and stuff like this, and it's theoretical that Go is significantly faster than JavaScript. The thing about this is that really what takes the most time when you're building a huge JavaScript project is building the JavaScript. So if you'd like to reduce the time, if you'd like to reduce the time by using a lower level language, using SWC or what's the name of it, ESBuild, something like this, will be the effective approach to it. Because you want to compile a lot of the JavaScript, the compilation is the expensive part. And really managing the monorepo itself isn't as expensive. So with NX, you also have the caching mechanism, which is very powerful. Yeah. So it's hard to illustrate further than I have, but it's very powerful when you have large code bases. From what I know, Monorepo doesn't have a caching mechanism, but again, I have to say that I really read about it on the shall we. More questions? Okay, guys, so thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks again for Codementor for hosting the event and for running the platform. Again, it's very useful. If you guys would like to contact me, I am available in LinkedIn within Adam Jen, Twitter, Adam Genshaft, and my GitHub handle is Adam Jen. Thanks again, and I will see you around. Thanks. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks, Shmuel. Thanks, Yelene. Thanks. Let me know if you'd like me to cover anything else or talk or discuss anything. Just let me know. I will be here for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Mati, thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay, guys, so I will leave. If anybody has anything you'd like to discuss, to suggest, to talk, to bring up, join me on LinkedIn, send a message, and we'll be in touch. Bye. Cheers.